For centuries, villagers whispered that the great mound at Nordfjord was cursed, haunted by fire, erased from memory. But when they finally opened the Viking burial ship beneath its surface, what they uncovered was not a monument to honor, but evidence of a burial meant to obliterate someone's legacy. Blackened soil, shattered weapons, and shield lids stacked like a warning. These weren't the relics of glory, but signs of deliberate erasure. What secret was so dangerous that even memory had to burn? To find the answer, we need to return to the moment the first shovel pierced that haunted earth. Nordfjord lies at the sheltered end of the Eidsfjord, where steep green slopes meet a wide, flat valley. Here, the land rises in gentle folds, but one mound stands apart, a rounded hill nearly 30 meters across and 4 meters high, ringed by a shallow moat that fills with water in the spring. Generations have called it Rundahagien, the round hill, or Lisje Skjoratipen. And for as long as anyone remembers, it has been a place of both pride and unease. The mound dominates the old Myklebust farm, visible from the main road and the harbor. In the oldest parish records, it is listed simply as a landmark, but in the stories passed between neighbors, it claimed a far greater presence. Children dared each other to touch its side at midnight, and some parents warned their sons not to tether animals nearby. Even before the first spade broke ground, people whispered that the mound was guarded by the dead. A late 19th century folktale describes a restless fire beneath the soil and a curse on anyone who tried to disturb the earth. Livestock that sickened, or sudden storms on the fjord, were sometimes blamed on the mound's anger. Yet the same mound also drew respect. It was the largest of 5 burial hills along the stretch of valley, a sign that this land once belonged to someone of immense power. Local letters from the early 1800s describe it as the resting place of a forgotten king, and old men recalled how their fathers would avoid plowing too close, out of both fear and reverence. In the winter, when the snow drifted around its base, the mound seemed to loom larger, its moat a frozen ring that set it apart from the living fields. By the time the first archaeologists arrived, the air around Rundahagien was thick with contradiction. Some villagers hoped for treasure, others for proof of ancient greatness, but most kept their distance, uneasy with the thought of breaking a silence that had lasted 1,000 years. The mound's presence had shaped the rhythms of the village, its festivals, its boundaries, even its sense of what stories could be told and which should be left alone. For outsiders, the mound was a puzzle of earth and rumor. For those who lived in its shadow, it was a reminder that the past was not always a source of pride. The boundaries of the mound, marked by its broad moat and the worn path that circled it, were as much social as physical. Here, the landscape and the community's memory were bound together, each shaping the other. The mound waited, holding its secret until the day that silence was broken. Anders Lorange arrived at Rundahagien with the optimism of a man expecting to find glory sealed in earth. He had studied the stories, measured the mound, and prepared for a burial like those at Tune or Gokstad, an untouched ship, treasures, a king's last voyage. The first cut into the turf, though, released not the scent of ancient wood or rich soil, but a thick wave of ash and char, sour and heavy, as if a fire still lingered beneath the ground. Lorange's field notebook, its pages now yellowed in the Bergen archives, describes his confusion. The soil was dark and greasy, packed with streaks of burnt debris. Instead of a ship's graceful outline, he found only a shallow depression, its edges blurred by heat and time. Iron fragments surfaced everywhere, rivets by the handful, many fused together, some bent and half melted. Shield bosses, once polished and proud, lay warped and blackened, scattered without pattern. The tools and weapons he uncovered were twisted, their blades and hafts so badly damaged that even their purpose seemed lost. There were no ranks of grave goods, no amulets or jewelry, no orderly display of a warrior's possessions. Lorange wrote, It is as if the ship was not buried, but destroyed. The absence of a hull outline was impossible to ignore. In other ship burials, the planks and ribs leave a ghostly print in the earth, a negative image of the vessel's shape. Here, nothing remained but the evidence of a great burning, the rivets marking where wood once held fast, now adrift in a sea of ash. Each handful of earth yielded more confusion. The mound was not a ship's cradle, but the aftermath of a deliberate act. Lagrange's own words betray his unease. All order has gone. The grave is a ruin, not a resting place. The local press seized on the strangeness. Reports from late 1874 spoke of a stench so strong it clung to the workers' clothes, and of a mood that shifted from excitement to discomfort as the full disorder became clear. Lagrange, who had hoped to recover a king's memory, instead found a burial that seemed designed to erase. He grew restless, returning to the site at night, searching for some sign that would explain the violence. The dig ended not with the satisfaction of discovery, but with the sense of having trespassed on something meant to be forgotten. The questions would follow him, and the community, long after the last spadeful of ash was lifted from the mound. Deep beneath the layers of ash and shattered iron, Lagrange uncovered a vessel unlike any made in Norway. The cremated remains had been gathered into a bronze urn, its surface chased with Celtic knotwork, a rare import, likely carried across the North Sea generations before. The vessel itself was scorched, its rim warped by heat, but its foreign origin would have marked it as a prize in any other grave. Here, it was buried not in splendor, but under a dense cluster of shield bosses. 12 in total, each one the iron heart of a shield, blackened and bent, stacked in a tight, uneven pile directly above the urn. The wood and leather that once gave the shields their shape had burned away, leaving only the warped metal and traces of carbonized wood pressed between the bosses. In most Viking ship burials, shields are arranged with care, lined along the hull or set beside the body to signal the warrior's honor. At Myklebust, the bosses formed a lid, their arrangement more like a barricade than a tribute. The pattern was unmistakable. The vessel containing what remained of the body had been sealed beneath these shields, as if to weigh it down or lock it away. The rest of the burial offered no sign of ceremony. No amulets, no carefully placed weapons, no animal bones to accompany the dead. Only this heavy, deliberate cover, as though the shields were meant to keep something in rather than protect or celebrate the one beneath. The catalogs from Lagrange's dig list, each boss by weight and diameter, noting the scorched edges and fused rivets. Their number, 12, stood out. Not enough for a full ship's complement, not arranged for display, but just enough to form a barrier. The foreign urn and the shield lid together suggested a burial that was not meant to honor, but to contain. The question lingered, heavy as the iron itself. What had these shields been meant to hold down, and why was even the finest vessel in the grave pressed so tightly beneath them? No trace of woven cloth surfaced from the blackened soil. Not a single thread or bead to suggest a cloak, a blanket, or a funeral shroud. In other ship burials, even after centuries, the faint impressions of wool or linen sometimes linger, pressed into the earth by the weight of the mound, preserved by luck or by chemistry. At Myklebust, there is nothing. The fire consumed more than flesh and timber. It left behind a silence where color and pattern should have been. The same emptiness surrounds the dead in other ways. High-status Viking graves often hold animal bones, horses, dogs, sometimes cattle, laid near the body as companions for the journey beyond. Here, the earth gave up no full skeletons, no careful arrangements, only a scattering of burnt fragments mixed deep in the ash. Not a single jawbone, hoof, or horn survived to tell of sacrifice or loyalty. The grave offered no tokens of passage, no evidence of ritual comfort. Jewelry, too, is absent. No brooches, no silver arm rings, no beads of glass or amber. Even when fire ravages a burial, the densest metals and hardest stones can endure. At Myklabust, the only precious object was the bronze urn itself, foreign, battered, and buried beneath the shields. The rest is missing, not lost to time, but seemingly never granted in the first place. Such gaps cannot be explained by accident or decay alone. Across Scandinavia, even the most heavily burned graves tend to yield scraps of textile, hints of animal offering, or the glint of personal adornment. Here, the emptiness is systematic. What was not destroyed by fire was simply withheld. The result is a grave that reads less like a memorial and more like an act of erasure, a deliberate refusal to leave any trace that could be cherished or remembered. The evidence is absence, and the absence is the message. Archaeologist Dr. Aurora Leivdahl leads the present-day investigation, her team working beneath temporary shelters as rain taps on plastic sheeting. The numbers now dwarf those from the last century. More than 1,100 iron rivets have been mapped and catalogued, each one a silent witness to the ship's original size. Ground-penetrating radar traces the faint outline of a hull nearly 30 meters long, larger than any Viking ship previously unearthed in Norway. The soil, sampled at regular intervals, tells its own story. High-temperature mineral phases, detected by FTIR and Raman spectroscopy, confirm that parts of the mound were exposed to heat above 1,000 degrees Celsius. In the central ashlands, the team recovered a warped bronze ring, its surface blistered from intense fire. Scattered within the same layer, micro-CT scans reveal splinters of calcined animal bone, fragments so small they escaped the first dig, now identified as horse and cattle by isotope analysis. The distribution of rivets forms a chaotic map with clusters skewed off the main axis. Some are fused together, others twisted into loops, suggesting not just collapse, but violent burning and rapid cooling. Soil micromorphology exposes pockets of vitrified sand, glass-like beads that can only form in the heart of a sustained blaze. Phosphate mapping shows spikes where organic matter once burned hottest, aligning with the central depression where the bronze vessel and shield bosses were found. Every layer, every artifact points to a fire engineered for destruction, not remembrance. The ship was not simply set alight. It was consumed in a controlled inferno, the evidence of erasure written into the ground itself. In a climate-controlled room at the Bergen Archives, an archive specialist unrolls the faded correspondence of Anders Lorange. Among the brittle pages, one stands out, a field note written in hurried script, dated to the final days of the 1874 excavation. Lorange's handwriting, compared stroke for stroke against his official reports, leaves no doubt of its origin. The words, pressed deep into the paper, read, "This grave will eat itself. I have not slept for fear I have opened what should have remained closed. Whoever comes, seek not gold, but the one who was meant to be forgotten." The note was never meant for public eyes. It was sealed in a glass bottle and left near the edge of the chamber, discovered decades later during a stabilization effort in 1937. The glass, hand-blown and clouded by age, and the ink tested against known samples from Lorange's journals, confirm the note's authenticity. The message is not a confession of discovery, but a plea, an admission that the act of digging had disturbed something meant to remain silent. For the archive specialist, this document is more than a relic. It is a rare glimpse into the mind of a man who had hoped to recover a king's glory, but found only a grave engineered to erase. Lorange's words shift the story from artifact to memory, from the mechanics of excavation to the haunting weight of what cannot be restored. His fear lingers, a reminder that some histories are buried not just in earth, but in the choices of those who survived them. The search for identity becomes personal. The puzzle is no longer just about a lost ship or scattered shields, but about the struggle to remember someone the world was meant to forget. Among those who study the Myklabust mound, one name rises above the rest: King Oddbjorn of Firdi, Firthi, a regional ruler whose story survives in the Heimskringla sagas. In the late 9th century, Oddbjorn controlled the valleys and fjords of western Norway, territory that includes Nordfjordeid. Saga accounts place his defeat at the hands of Harald Fairhair around 876 during the violent unification of Norway. The timing aligns with the burial's radiocarbon dates, and the sheer scale of the mound fits the profile of a king. Local genealogies and power maps from the period reinforce the connection. No other known figure from this region commanded such resources at that time. Yet, the sagas remain silent on Oddbjorn's burial, offering only hints of his fall and the erasure that followed. Archaeologists and saga scholars agree. While no inscription confirms it, the evidence points to Oddbjorn as the strongest candidate for the forgotten king beneath the mound. Every layer of the Myklabust mound invites doubt. The scale and violence of the fire, hot enough to melt iron and erase wood, suggest a burial meant to obliterate, not to honor. Some archaeologists see a calculated purge, a rival king's memory deliberately burned, his ship and grave goods reduced to ash, his passage to the afterlife denied. This kind of destruction fits a political message, a warning to any who might claim the same power. Yet others point to rare extreme rites known from a handful of other Viking cremations, where fire was used not just to release the spirit, but to transform and protect it. The uneven preservation and chaotic artifact scatter could be the result of later disturbance, plowing, erosion, or even looting in the centuries after the burial. The evidence resists certainty. What remains is a grave that may have been designed to erase, or a rite so intense it left only confusion behind. The Myklabust mound once held a burial ship over 20 meters long, marked by hundreds of scattered rivets and a single bronze vessel containing cremated remains beneath a stack of 12 shield bosses. Modern analysis confirms the fire was deliberate and intense, far beyond standard Viking funerary practice. Yet even after 2 excavations, the ship's full dimensions, the exact ritual performed, and the true identity of the deceased remain unproven. The leading evidence points to a high-status figure, possibly King Oddbjorn, whose memory was deliberately erased by fire and force. This case shows how some burials were designed to remove a person from history, not honor them. Today, every artifact and document preserved from the site resists that intended erasure. As Anders Lorange wrote in his sealed note, the grave silence is not final. The unanswered questions at Myklabust remind us that archaeology recovers not only what was buried, but what others tried to destroy.